Hello, I'm PM Smith. November 5th is coming. I need you to vote no on question 1. It's a constitutional amendment. It has nothing to do with abortion. It has everything to do with robbing us of our authority to raise our children. It has everything to do with robbing us of the ability to protect our children from transgender behavior. I need you to vote no on November 5th for question 1. Stay tuned. I have some special friends who will be discussing question 1. I need you to stay tuned and stay focused as we continue with community conversations. Good morning. Welcome to Community Conversations. This morning, we are focusing on a critical issue that we're going to have a vote on November 5th. That would be question 1. Miss Debbie, tell us about question 1 and why we need to say no.
Question 1, we want you to vote no on question 1. It is called the Reproductive Freedom Amendment. The sponsors of this amendment want you to think it's all about abortion, but it's not. That is the Trojan horse to trick Marylanders into voting away their parental rights.
Now, let me say this. I've been a lawyer. I'm now a pastor. I'm shepherding God's people, and I know a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's exactly what this bill is. What do you say, Father?
As so often happens with things that the Maryland Assembly will enact, they'll put it under the guise of something that it isn't in order to make it more palatable to more people. But this is an assault on parental authority. This is an assault on the family, and it's something that God's people need to get together to vote against.
Pastor Cuban.
Well, I think the majority of most people, when they see that question, they're going to see this as a question pertaining to a woman's rights, reproductive rights. In a sense, what we have to understand that there's a level of deception here, and it's more about parental rights. And we want to expose that so everyone can see this.
Say that again. We need to expose it.
We want to expose it. And we're here today to expose this lie. And we want to bring it to everyone's attention so that when November 5th comes, you will vote no on that question number 1.
That's because the majority of the voting community is not informed. There's no clarity. There is ambiguity, and you were close to it.
That's by design. They're already trying to train Marylanders to think that reproductive freedom means abortion. You see ads where they'll claim that women's rights are under attack, and then they'll say, we're going to protect your reproductive freedom. They're not using the word abortion because they want Marylanders to think that reproductive freedom means only abortion. And when you look at the amendment and even the law that put the amendment on the ballot, the word abortion is not used in that law. They don't even use the word woman. So this is how we know that this is a big deception and that it is about more than just abortion and also applies to more than just adults. The amendment itself says that every person in the very beginning. It doesn't say that every adult person or every person over the age of 18. So we know that this applies to more than just adult males and females.
So it could apply to my 14-year-old daughter.
Yes, sir.
My 15-year-old son.
Yes, sir. And already in Maryland, minor daughters can go and obtain an abortion without parental consent. That has been true since 1992. Abortion is completely unrestricted in Maryland and fully funded. This amendment is targeting children so that they can seek gender surgeries and drugs without parental consent or knowledge.
Say that again. Gender what?
Gender, drugs, or surgeries. So a 10-year-old boy could go and obtain puberty blockers without parental consent or knowledge. A 14-year-old girl could obtain double mastectomy without parental consent or knowledge.
Hold it. At my school, they can't even give you your inhaler or give you an aspirin without consenting.
Exactly.
And yet these are life-changing drugs, life-changing surgeries, which in many cases are irreversible. Mm-hmm. And so it puts children at risk, again, without their parents' knowledge or consent. It's an invasion of the family.
Yes, it is.
I've been encouraging people to think back on the COVID epidemic,
right?
The pandemic, and the things that we learned from that pandemic. One of the silver linings in that cloud was so many parents suddenly began to learn the things that their children were being indoctrinated with in public schools And there was a reaction against that. And of course, the reaction, I think, took those who were on the side of indoctrination by surprise. But that's kind of opened the door for us to become more informed as parents, to understand what things are being planned that are contrary to our children's well-being, and again, contrary to our own authority as their parents.
It's interesting that over and over you use the word indoctrination when it comes to our children. Yeah. And as far as the voting public, is disinformation, I believe. Mm-hmm. The ambiguity is so vague, anybody, especially our kids, can become targets. And you saying as a parent, I have no authority?
Well, these guidelines, they're called the Guidelines for Gender Identity Non-Discrimination, were ushered in 2015. They're not law, but they were being treated that way. And these guidelines encourage school personnel to defer to children on whether or not to inform their parents about things about themselves, like if they're changing their identity when they get to school. So as a matter of fact, parents sued the Montgomery County Public School System because they were keeping secrets from the parents. Unfortunately, when it went to district court, the district court ruled against the parents in favor of Montgomery County Public School Systems keeping secrets from the parents. When they appealed that decision, the federal court also ruled against the parents. So these are the guidelines that are encouraging the school to just keep secrets from the parents, which sets up a kind of a hostility between the children and the parents.
Who wrote those guidelines?
There is a list of people. It was, it has many names on it, but all of the people involved in creating the guidelines came from one perspective, and that was from the LGBT perspective and not from a general perspective of the parents, because these guidelines affect all children in the schools. And certainly we don't want any children that are harmed or feel unsafe, but guidelines should not come from just one perspective when they're affecting whether or not a girl is sharing a bathroom or a locker room with a boy.
My question, the case is on appeal, or have the parents given up?
It already went to appeal. The federal court ruled against the parents in favor of the school system. When they tried to take it to the Supreme Court said that they didn't have standing, so they wouldn't hear it. So I'm not sure where else this will go. But if this amendment passes, there will be really nothing they can do. It will be a child's right to have all these rights in school where they might declare themselves a different identity, and it won't be up to the parents to be able to find out.
Another important fact is that if this passes, it's going to be an issue with the future, because this will almost be impossible to reverse. Once it's done, it's almost etched in stone. And I want everyone who is a parent, a grandparent, a father, mother, to think about the fact that your parental rights are being violated. When it gets to a point that we no longer can be parents and we can't even raise our children, and the government and people that are in political positions make rules that block us from being able to be a family unit, I think there's a crisis in our nation. And what we're seeing here in our community right now is an atrocity. And we need people to rise up and come to an awareness that this is actually taking place right now. This is not future, this is right now. And we need to vote and make sure that on November 5th, we do not give an approval or say yes to that question. We have to vote against it.
It's vote no now. It's going to appear as question 1, but it's really a constitutional amendment, right? Yeah. That changes all the previous existing law, and it becomes permanent. And you mentioned the word repeal. If it's going to be repealed, it has to take 60% of both houses and the majority of the voting public in order to repeal it. So that's going to be almost impossible. It will be permanent. That's why we need to say no when this first comes up in November.
And Deb, correct me if I'm not right on this, but because it would be a constitutional an amendment to the state constitution, it would also preclude the possibility of any future laws that would help to lessen the impact of this in the lives of children and parents. In other words, any laws that a group or that any legislature would sponsor or initiate wouldn't even be taken up or considered because it
All
would.
laws would have to conform to the Constitution.
Right.
So if this amendment passes, it becomes part of the Maryland Constitution.
Right.
And then every law would have to conform to that. So it would take, to change the amendment, it would take another law being passed through the General Assembly and then put on the ballot again for voters to decide if they wanted to add that to the amendment. And I wanted to add, this is the Maryland Comprehensive Health Education Framework, pre-kindergarten through high school, that has been used in the school where they've been indoctrinating the children with this idea of gender identity and gender expression. Now, this is what parents would argue against when they would go to the school boards. If this amendment passes, there would be no point in parents going to the school board because this would be a child's right to learn things like this. But that is just awful to ask a child, are you a boy or a girl today?
Yeah.
What are your pronouns? They don't even understand this concept. And then they are talking about more and more really sensitive subjects that belong in the parents' purview. By middle school in 7th grade, this curriculum has adults in the school talking to rooms full of 12-year-old boys and girls about sex acts.
Debbie, look, I'm a parent.
Right.
I'm a Christian. It's my responsibility to educate my children when it comes to their sexuality.
Yes.
So what if my rights as a Christian, a practicing Christian, conflicts with what they're teaching to my kid?
It's your child's right to learn this stuff, and it doesn't matter.
I'm their dad.
It doesn't matter. They have a right now. This is what this amendment does. It gives children the same rights as adults to make decisions about their reproductive system and their reproductive anatomy. You know, in the criminal justice system, they recognize children as minors and they're treated as juveniles because they recognize this fact that children do not have the same capacity as adults to make decisions because they don't understand long-term consequences.
Isn't that an inconsistency?
Yes, it is.
Sure it is. We don't allow 14-year-olds to vote for the same reason. As parents, we should be offended by this intrusion into our authority over our children and grandchildren. This isn't something that's just kind of nibbling around the edges of politics. This goes to the very heart of the natural law, to the very heart of human morality. And so we should take this seriously.
When we see how the government gets involved in this process of determining what's right and wrong for our children, it blocks a parent from being able to be the overseer and the family unit from being a happy structure to raise a child in a healthy environment. And think about this: what child at the age of 14 is mature enough to make these type of decisions? In fact, it's even proven a man and a woman doesn't even develop in life until they're into their mid-20s and early 30s. So at the age of 14, the brain is not even matured or developed enough to make a choice. And how often do you hear stories where people make these decisions only to realize that 3 or 4 years later, I made a mistake.
Right.
And you can't reverse this.
It's irreversible.
If you study the history of Marxism, one of the things that you learn from that is that one of their chief tactics in establishing their own ideology in a country was to separate children from their parents ideologically, to teach parents in the government schools, to teach children in the government schools, don't trust your parents.
Right.
Your parents will tell you this, but this is what's true. This is what's true, not what your parents tell you. And eventually it becomes a situation where the children are turned against their parents, even to the point of betraying them, in some cases, to the government.
Look, you use the word Marxism. It sounds like the government is grabbing my kids, kidnapping my kids. That's what it sounds like.
Absolutely.
But I'm dead.
It's interesting, Pastor, that you should bring that up because in California they have sanctuary rules that allow minor children to come to California and get these gender drugs and surgeries without parental consent. They will not return the children to the parents. So
Hold it, stop. Leave Maryland, go to California and get what done?
gender surgeries and drugs to do that without parental consent. And Tim Walz also signed an executive order for Minnesota to do the same thing, make Minnesota a sanctuary state for minor children who want to pursue gender drugs and surgeries. Their legislature is right now trying to pass a law to make that permanent, because as an executive order, it's not permanent. Maryland, if this amendment is passed, those words, that every person, it doesn't say that every person in Maryland, so Maryland could become a sanctuary for children to undergo these drugs and surgeries without parental consent as well.
So you telling me they seduce my kid, right?
Right.
And indoctrinate my kid without my knowledge, my involvement, my permission, rob me of my authority, they're robbing me of my child.
Right. And there's a lot of deception because, you know, they're teaching that in the school. That's not based on science, that someone can change from boy to girl or girl to boy. Our chromosomes tell us exactly what we are. This is all cosmetic. If you have a Y chromosome, you're a male. If you don't, you're a female. And the deception continues because the ballot does not show the Maryland voter exactly what the amendment will say. The ballot's wording is much different. They leave out the words that every person, and they claim on the ballot that this is confirming a right. Well, there is no such right called reproductive freedom that exists. There's nothing to confirm. This amendment is creating a brand new right for all individuals regardless of age. And just for our pro-choice friends out there are no laws preventing adults from seeking any type of reproductive care. And if you vote no on this amendment, none of the abortion laws will be changed in Maryland.
Deb, do you have a copy of the ballot wording there?
We
Maybe
do.
that you could read off?
So
Big voice.
the actual amendment says that every person as a central component of an individual's right to liberty and equality has the fundamental right to reproductive freedom, including but not limited to the ability to make and effectuate decisions to prevent, continue, or end one's own pregnancy, and the state may not abridge that right. The ballot says the proposed amendment confirms an individual's fundamental right to reproductive freedom, including but not limited to the ability to make and effectuate decisions around pregnancy. So they leave out that every person because I think they thought people might notice that it doesn't say that every woman, which if this were just about abortion, then it would only mean females.
Right.
So they leave that part out. But they do say including but not limited to. And again, reproductive freedom is not defined in the amendment. It's not defined in the law that put this amendment on the ballot. And it's not defined anywhere in Maryland law.
So since it's not defined, what would that mean?
It could mean almost anything they decide it means. So if you pass it, you'll find out what they want it to mean.
Oh, you'll find out after you pass it. That's why we need to say no.
That's why we need
And
to
we're
vote
talking
no on
question, it's going to be question, but it's really a constitutional amendment. Right?
And Pastor, this is the law right here that put the amendment on the ballot.
I saw it.
It's less than 2 pages long. Again, it's all about what's not in it. There are no minimum age limits. There are no parental consent requirements. The words abortion and woman do not appear in this law. There is no definition for reproductive freedom.
Now, when the bill first came up for consideration in the Assembly, I believe there was an effort to put age limits into this, and
Yes.
that was voted down.
Yes. Effort to put age limits, parental consent requirements, that was all voted down. There were efforts to even switch out reproductive freedom and put abortion in there, that was rejected. There was an effort to even require that the actual amendment would appear on the ballot, and that was rejected as well.
Miss Debbie, I wouldn't know about it if you hadn't come and informed, if I hadn't gone to a forum where you were a part of, and I knew about it. It was, what was the name of that forum we were at a month or two ago?
The Parental Power Summit.
Okay, we need to do that again.
We're doing that on the October 23rd, so glad you brought that up. The night before early in-person voting begins, October 23rd, there will be a Parental Power Summit.
And what's it called? Parental Power Summit. Where's it going to be?
Huber Memorial Church.
You sure?
I'm pretty darn sure.
Look, Miss Debbie.
Do you know what goes on in your church?
Look, Miss Debbie, I am grateful because you're the one that brought this to us, right? Our brother Al Moulton and others who've gone to Annapolis with you. If we had not gone and learned through you and through the summit, we would not know. And the damnable thing is the majority of the voting public don't know. They don't know.
I would like to add that the majority of the voting public don't vote. A lot of people who have a voice, who have the power, they don't exercise their right. And when you talk about losing your rights, your greatest right that you have is to vote. You can be a voice. And there are people that believe in what is right, but they don't go out, they don't take the time. And I think We need to encourage the public. And if you're a person who has faith, or you're someone that just believes in truth, we need to stand up. And the Christian community itself, for the most part, has been lackadaisical concerning this.
You seem to be very involved, informed, and emotional. You got to fill me in on that.
How can you not be emotional? This whole issue is going to be destructive within the family unit. People don't realize this is not about a woman's rights issue. Most people that are going to look at this are going to think that that's what it represents. But it's
Where'd
really,
you get your information? Where'd you get your equipping, your knowledge of this?
it's because when you look at the wording of this, one of the key things to notice, they use the word person in their language. And when you define a person, that could represent someone who's over the age of 18, or even someone who's a minor, a child. So in other words, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old could be a part of this. So what happens, you destroy the family structure. We have so many people today that are fighting for rights, and they think this is about the right for a woman to have right over her body. But this is not about that. This is about the rights of a family, the family unit, parents, mothers and fathers having the right to make decisions for their children. If this is voted for, then a child would overrule the parent and to be able to go and do what they want without the parent's knowledge or approval.
Okay, well, I'm a parent. You robbed me of my authority, and you robbed me of my ability to protect my child. As far as I'm concerned, family is the first institution created by God, and as African American, it's an anchoring institution to our people. Anything that's going to attack the family, I got to fight.
Absolutely. The family is the structure for society. If you lose family, you may lose morality. You know, if there are no fathers and no mothers able to sow into their children, then what's our next generation going to be like?
Well, that's because the family is the foundational building block for all of society. I don't care where you are, the neighborhood and the nation. So it's worth fighting for.
In every culture, in every religion, every society, mothers and fathers love their children. And that right to be a mother and a father, to raise a child, there's no one that has a greater qualification to teach their sons and daughters than a mom and dad.
Now, you know I've been in Christian ministry over 40 years. I grew up here in Baltimore. I ran into a guy, grew up with me, been on drugs, everything, totally secular. And he said, hey, PM, you know, at this stage, the only thing more important to us than our children are their children. I'm a grandfather. That's true for me. Is it true for you?
Sure. Yeah.
The only thing more valuable to me than my children are my children's children.
Yes.
And the privilege I have of putting my thumbprint on them, they're worth fighting for.
Yes. The reason why society, you know, there was a saying I've heard from years ago, if you're going to destroy a society, it's going to be destroyed from within.
Right.
When the morals and the values of the family unit is being challenged, then a mother and father, they lose their position and their right to parent.
This is the single most important reason to vote this election here in Maryland. So an early in-person voting begins October 24th. It's October 24th through October 31st, and then Election Day is November 5th. Vote no on question 1.
And we often say that the three most important things to take a stand for, the things that are worth fighting for, are faith, freedom, and family. And this question, this ballot, attacks all three. And so it should motivate parents strongly to get out there and vote against question 1.
You said faith, freedom,
faith, family, and freedom.
I'll go with that.
It attacks all of them.
I'll go with that. That makes sense.
We need to spread the word to our friends and family. Let everybody know. This is so important because we're coming close. We're just a short time away from this November 5th date. And put on your schedule, put on your calendar, take off work if you have to, but go and vote. Be a voice.
Those are the things we need to fight for, and this constitutional amendment is the one thing we need to fight against.
Right.
You got
And this
me.
is common ground. This is a common ground issue, whether you are Republican, Democrat, or independent, pro-life or pro-choice. We can all come together on this. This is a unifying issue that parents should have the authority to make the decisions when it comes to their children's health care and education.
I think that's critical. This is a unifying issue. Our people need to know that. And and you said it has nothing to do with your political affiliation. It has everything to do with, what did you say, faith?
Faith,
freedom.
family, and freedom.
All right, I can go with that. What's next? Nothing.
Nothing.
That's critically
Let's
important.
defeat this.
Let's
We got to
and we're
defeat this,
talking-
protect the family, protect children.
And again, question 1,
Vote no.
vote no. And it has to do with a constitutional amendment that is ambiguous, it's deceptive, disingenuous, and it's a fraud. It seduces our kids, indoctrinates our kids, and robs parents of the parental authority, God-given parental authority that we need to have if we're going to raise our children and father our families.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, is there anything more that we need to know going forward?
Again, just want to say there are no Maryland laws preventing adults from seeking reproductive care. Voting no on this amendment will not change any of the abortion laws, but voting yes will give children a right to seek life-altering surgeries and drugs without parental consent or knowledge. It is so imperative that we vote no on question 1 to protect all the children and families of
I
Maryland.
think it's one other thing. I'll be paying it for. I'll be paying for it. Am I right?
Yes.
I will be paying for it.
Yes.
I'll be
Right.
paying
Because
for it.
money cannot be a barrier to someone exercising their rights, so we will all be paying for
Taxpayers will
not
pay
only
for
the
this.
surgeries on adults, but surgeries like this on children.
No. That is worth fighting against. And again, I'm going to say we're uninformed. They have run a scam on us, and our children are present. They are future, but our future is present now, and they're worth fighting for.
Right.
Help me, sir.
What else can I say? Everything we said here is something that we need to really consider it as a very serious matter. Our future and everything that happens from here out, the next 20, 30 years, could pivot on this one question.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're taking this time for us to come together to inform the public, because what happens here, once that happens and once that law is passed, or if it's passed, then as we were saying before, it would be almost impossible to reverse that. If we lose our right as parents, we lose our right as a family, it's going to affect the structure of our community in the years to come.
And I want to say this to everybody out there. You need to be at the next Parental Power Summit. You need to be there. You need to take a stand. If you're a pastor, if you're a priest, if you're a parent, or if you're just generally interested in the welfare of children, you need to be at the next Parental Power Summit. You can check out everything you need to know about it at parentalpowersummit.com. Do it now.
We'll be right here on the 23rd. You're invited. And how much does it cost?
It's free.
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 Good. Any parking issues?
No parking, big parking lot out there.
Any seating issues?
Doesn't appear so.
No steps to climb?
What time? We didn't say the time.
What time is it going to be?
6 o'clock, is it?
I'm not sure.
don't
Help
know.
me.
I don't know.
Help
Someone
me
tell me.
What time is it?
7 p.m.
7 p.m.
7
7
p.m.
p.m.
Good, good.
7
We'll
p.m.
be here. Amen. We're grateful. We're grateful. We're grateful. Thank you, Miss Debbie.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Father.
Pastor.
Let's fight. No on question 1.
Amen.